If I had feared failure, the world would still be in the dark. Failure is not your enemy. It's your teacher. It's the feedback system of progress. You don't become great by avoiding mistakes. You become great by using them. In this message, I'll teach you how to stop running from failure and start working with it, until your missteps light the path to something revolutionary. Subscribe to our channel if you're ready to master your mind, and tell us, where are you watching from? Let me tell you something about failure that most people will never understand. In my laboratory, we conducted over 10,000 experiments to create the light bulb. 10,000 attempts that could have been called failures. But I never saw them that way, not once. You see, the world has it all wrong about failure. They've created this false dichotomy, success on one side, failure on the other. As if they're opposites, as if one negates the other. This fundamental misunderstanding is why so many potentially brilliant minds never reach their full potential. When I worked on the light bulb, each experiment taught me something new. Each failure illuminated another path forward. Every time a filament burned out too quickly, every time a vacuum seal broke, every time the glass shattered, these weren't failures. They were discoveries. Each one eliminated another way that wouldn't work, bringing me closer to the way that would. Here's what you need to understand. Failure isn't an endpoint. It's not even a detour. It's the very road itself. Every great invention, every revolutionary breakthrough, every world-changing discovery came through a series of what others would call failures. But to the inventor, to the innovator, to the person who truly understands progress, these are simply steps on the staircase of achievement. I remember the newspapers calling me foolish. They said I was wasting time and resources. Edison's folly, they called it. But what they saw as repeated failure, I recognized as systematic elimination. Each test crossed off another possibility, refined our understanding, and moved us forward, even if that movement wasn't visible to the untrained eye. This is the first and most crucial shift you must make in your thinking. Stop seeing failure as the opposite of success. Start seeing it as the foundation of success. Every failed experiment is a building block. Every mistake is mortar. Every setback is structural support for what you're creating. When you truly understand this, something remarkable happens. The fear begins to dissolve. The pressure lifts. The paralysis of perfectionism loses its grip. Because you realize that failure isn't something that happens to you. It's something that works for you. Let me give you a practical way to start this shift today. Take out a piece of paper. Write down your 3 most recent failures. Now, next to each one, write down what that experience taught you. What did you learn about the process, about yourself, about what doesn't work? This isn't just an exercise. It's the beginning of your reformation. You're starting to see failure the way an inventor sees it, as information, as progress, as an essential part of the journey. Remember this: I didn't fail 10,000 times. I successfully found 10,000 ways that wouldn't work, and each one was necessary to find the way that would. That's not failure. That's the scientific method. That's progress. That's the path to revolution. The next time someone tells you you failed, smile, because you know something they don't. You know that you've just eliminated another wrong answer, bringing you one step closer to the right one. You know that what they call failure is actually the foundation of your future success. This is where it begins. This mental shift is your first step toward mastery, toward innovation, toward breakthrough. Are you ready to redefine failure in your own life? Because once you do, nothing can stop you, nothing can discourage you, nothing can break your spirit of discovery. Let me tell you about the most powerful mindset I've ever encountered, the experimenter's mindset. It's not just about trying things. It's about approaching life itself as a grand laboratory, where every attempt, every test, every trial brings you closer to mastery. In my Menlo Park laboratory, we didn't just conduct experiments, we lived them. Every day was an opportunity to test something new, to push boundaries, to question assumptions. This wasn't just work. It was a way of thinking, a way of being, a way of seeing the world. The experimenter's mindset begins with curiosity, not the passive curiosity of idle wondering, but the active curiosity that compels you to take things apart, to understand their inner workings, to ask not just, how does this work, but how else could it work? This is the curiosity that drove me to dissect every failed attempt, to examine every burnt-out filament, to question every assumption about electricity and light. But curiosity alone isn't enough. The true experimenter's mindset requires courage. The courage to look foolish, the courage to be wrong, the courage to destroy what you've built so you can build something better. Do you think it was easy to scrap months of work when a better idea emerged? To admit that our initial assumptions were wrong? To start over when everyone was watching, waiting for results? This is where most people falter. They become too attached to their first attempts, too invested in their initial ideas, too afraid to break what they've built. But the true experimenter knows that attachment to results is the enemy of discovery. You must be willing to sacrifice what is good to discover what could be great. Here's how to develop this mindset. Start with small experiments in your daily life. Change your routine. Try new approaches to old problems. Document everything. Don't just note what works. Note especially what doesn't work and why. This is how you build the experimental database in your mind. In my laboratory, we had a saying, there are no failed experiments, only unexpected results. This isn't just a clever phrase. It's a fundamental truth about how progress works. Every unexpected result tells you something you didn't know before. Every surprise opens up new possibilities. Every failure contains within it the seeds of future success. The experimenter's mindset requires commitment. You must commit to the process, not just the outcome. Commit to learning, not just succeeding. Commit to understanding, not just achieving. This commitment is what carries you through the long hours, the disappointing results, the seemingly endless iterations. I remember working on the phonograph. People said it was impossible to capture sound. They said I was chasing a fantasy. But the experimenter's mindset isn't concerned with what others say is impossible. It's only concerned with what hasn't been tried yet, with what might be possible if we just keep pushing, keep testing, keep experimenting. Here's a crucial aspect of the experimenter's mindset that most people miss. You must learn to love the process itself. The joy isn't in the final breakthrough, though that's certainly satisfying. The real joy is in the experimentation itself, in the daily discovery, in the constant learning, in the endless possibilities that each new test reveals. Think about it. When was the last time you approached a problem like an experiment? Not as something to be solved immediately, but as something to be explored, tested, understood. This is the mindset that turns ordinary people into inventors, problems into opportunities, and failures into stepping stones. Start today. Take one problem you're facing, break it down into testable hypotheses, create small experiments to test each one, document everything, don't judge the results, just observe them. This is how you begin to think like an inventor. This is how you develop the experimenter's mindset. Remember, the greatest limitation in any experiment isn't the equipment, the resources, or the technology. It's the mindset of the experimenter. Change your mindset, and you change what's possible. Let me share with you one of the most crucial lessons I learned in my years of invention. The difference between those who succeed and those who fail often comes down to how they process setbacks. Most people create drama. Inventors collect data. In my laboratory, when an experiment didn't produce the desired results, you wouldn't hear wailing or gnashing of teeth. You wouldn't see people throwing their hands up in despair. Instead, you'd see focused observation, detailed note-taking, and immediate analysis. This wasn't just a practice. It was a fundamental principle of progress. Here's what most people do when they face a setback. They take it personally. They create stories about what it means about them, their abilities, their future. They wrap their failures in layers of emotion until the actual data is buried beneath a mountain of drama. This is precisely why they stay stuck. Let me show you a better way. When we were working on the light bulb, each failed attempt was treated as a data point. Nothing more, nothing less. A filament burns out in 2 seconds. That's data. The vacuum seal fails. That's data. The glass cracks under pressure. More data. Each result, whether positive or negative, was simply information to be recorded, analyzed, and used. This approach changes everything. When you stop seeing setbacks as personal affronts and start seeing them as data points, you free up enormous mental and emotional energy. Energy that can be redirected into analysis, innovation, and progress. Think about it. Would a scientist abandon an experiment because they took the results personally? Would a researcher throw away valuable data because it hurt their feelings? Of course not. Yet this is exactly what most people do with their failures. They let emotion cloud their judgment, bias their analysis, and ultimately prevent them from seeing the valuable information contained in every setback. Here's how to start treating your failures as data. First, create a failure log. Yes, you heard me right. Start documenting every setback, every mistake, every unwanted result. But, and this is crucial, document them objectively. No emotional language, no self-judgment. Just the facts. What happened? What were the conditions? What were the variables? What was the result? In my laboratory, we had thousands of pages of notes on experiments that didn't work. These weren't records of failure. They were databases of discovery. Each entry taught us something. Each data point moved us forward. Each negative result eliminated another dead end and illuminated the path to success. Let me give you a practical example. When working on the storage battery, we conducted over 50,000 experiments. Imagine if I had treated each unsuccessful test as a personal failure. The emotional toll would have been unbearable. Instead, we treated each result as data. Each test revealed something about the chemistry, the materials, the processes involved. This wasn't failure, this was research. Here's another crucial point. When you treat setbacks as data, you start to see patterns that would be invisible if you were blinded by emotion. These patterns are gold. They reveal underlying principles, highlight common pitfalls, and often point the way to breakthrough solutions. This approach requires discipline. It requires training yourself to step back from the emotional response and look at the situation objectively. When something doesn't work, your first question shouldn't be, "Why me?" It should be, "What does this tell me?" Start practicing this today. The next time something doesn't go as planned, catch yourself before the drama starts. Pull out your notebook. Write down exactly what happened in objective terms. What were the conditions? What were the variables? What was the result? No emotion, no judgment, just data. Remember, every setback contains information. Every failure holds lessons. Every mistake adds to your database of knowledge. But you can only access this wealth of information if you're willing to set aside the drama and look at the data. This is how inventors think. This is how innovators work. This is how progress is made, not through emotional reactions, but through careful observation, systematic documentation, and objective analysis. Let me tell you about persistence. Not the romanticized version you read about in books, but the real, gritty, day-after-day kind that actually changes the world. The kind that kept me working while others slept, that kept my laboratory lights burning when everyone else had gone home. You see, most people are waiting for perfection. They're waiting to get it right the first time. They're waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect conditions, the perfect idea. And while they're waiting, do you know what happens? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. In my work, I discovered something profound. Persistence beats perfection every single time. You don't have to get it right the first time. You don't have to get it right the 10th time. You just have to keep going longer than everyone else is willing to try. Let me tell you about the storage battery. 4,800 experiments. That's what it took. Not 48, not 480, 4,800 experiments. Each one documented, each one analyzed, each one teaching us something new. Do you think any of those early attempts were perfect? Of course not. But each one moved us forward, even if only by showing us what wouldn't work. Here's what most people don't understand about persistence. It's not about doing the same thing over and over. It's about trying something new every time, learning from each attempt, and staying in the game long enough to see patterns emerge that others miss because they quit too soon. I remember one of my associates coming to me, discouraged after months of unsuccessful experiments. He said, "We've failed over 1,000 times." I corrected him immediately. "We haven't failed once," I said. "We've successfully discovered over 1,000 ways that won't work." That's the essence of persistence, seeing every attempt as progress, not failure. But let me be clear, persistence isn't just about time spent. It's about intelligent persistence. It's about learning from each attempt. It's about making each new try better than the last. This is where most people go wrong. They confuse stubborn repetition with true persistence. In my laboratory, we had a system. Each experiment was documented. Each result was analyzed. Each new attempt incorporated what we learned from the last. This wasn't just trying the same thing over and over. This was evolutionary progress. Each generation of experiments was better than the last. Here's something crucial about persistence that most people miss. It's not about motivation. It's not about feeling inspired. It's about showing up and doing the work, especially when you don't feel like it, especially when others have given up, especially when everyone around you thinks you're crazy for continuing. I worked for 21 hours a day during intense periods of invention, not because I felt motivated every hour, not because each hour was filled with breakthrough moments, but because I understood that persistence itself is the key to breakthrough. The longer you stay with a problem, the more likely you are to solve it. Let me give you a practical framework for persistence. First, commit to a number of attempts. Before you even start, make it ridiculously high. Say 1,000 attempts. This changes your psychology completely. You're no longer trying to succeed quickly. You're settling in for the long haul. Each failure just becomes another step in your pre-committed journey. Second, document everything. Don't trust your memory. Don't rely on vague recollections. Write down every attempt, every result, every observation. This turns persistence from blind repetition into systematic progress. Third, celebrate the journey. When people asked me about my failures, I proudly told them about the thousands of attempts it took to create the light bulb. Each attempt was a badge of honor, proof of my persistence, evidence of my commitment to the goal. Remember this, the person who stays in the game the longest is usually the one who wins, not the one with the perfect plan, not the one with the most resources, not the one with the best initial idea, the one who persists. I've seen brilliant people fail because they gave up too soon. I've seen moderate talents achieve remarkable things because they simply refused to quit. Persistence is the great equalizer. It's the one thing that can overcome almost any obstacle, solve almost any problem, achieve almost any goal. This is your challenge. Stop waiting for perfection. Stop trying to get it right the first time. Instead, commit to persistence. Commit to staying in the game longer than anyone else thinks is reasonable. That's where the breakthroughs happen. That's where the impossible becomes possible. Let me share with you one of the most powerful secrets of innovation. Every attempt, every experiment, every seeming failure moves you closer to your goal. Even when it looks like you're going backward, you're actually moving forward. Let me show you why. In my work on the phonograph, every failed attempt taught us something crucial about sound reproduction. When the tinfoil tore, we learned about material stress. When the reproduction was faint, we learned about groove depth. When the sound was distorted, we learned about rotation speed. What looked like failures to others were actually invaluable lessons that guided us toward the final breakthrough. Here's what most people get wrong. They measure progress only by successful outcomes. But in the world of innovation, progress is measured by understanding. Every failed experiment increases your understanding and therefore moves you forward, even if the results aren't what you wanted. Think about it this way. When you're trying to find your way through a maze, every wrong turn actually helps you. It eliminates a path that doesn't work, making your next attempt more likely to succeed. This is exactly how innovation works. Every attempt that doesn't succeed eliminates a possibility, clarifies your understanding, and brings you closer to the solution. Let me give you a practical example from my work on the light bulb. We tried thousands of materials for the filament: bamboo, platinum, cotton, even human hair. Each one that didn't work taught us something specific about what we needed: better resistance to heat, different oxidation properties, improved durability. Every failure refined our understanding of what the successful solution would require. This is why I never saw any experiment as a waste of time. Each one, successful or not, added to our knowledge base. Each attempt, even if it ended in failure, contributed to our final success. This isn't just positive thinking, it's practical reality. Here's how to apply this principle in your own work. First, start measuring progress differently. Don't just count successes and failures. Instead, measure what you've learned from each attempt. What new understanding have you gained? What possibilities have you eliminated? What new questions have emerged? In my laboratory, we kept detailed records of every experiment, not just the successful ones. These records were gold mines of information. Every failed attempt was documented not as a failure, but as a step forward in our understanding. This systematic approach turned what others might see as setbacks into stepping stones. Let me tell you something crucial: the moment right before. Breakthrough often feels like the moment of greatest failure. Why? Because you've eliminated so many possibilities that it seems like nothing will work. But this is actually the moment when you're closest to success. You've cleared away all the wrong answers, leaving only the right ones to discover. Consider this: when we were working on the storage battery, each unsuccessful experiment narrowed down the field of possibilities. Each failure told us what wouldn't work, bringing us closer to what would. This isn't just theory, this is how real progress works. Here's another vital point: forward movement isn't always visible to others. When people visited my laboratory, they often saw what looked like chaos: failed experiments, broken equipment, discarded prototypes. But what they couldn't see was the accumulation of knowledge, the growing understanding, the steady progress toward our goal. This is why you can't let outside perspectives discourage you. Others might see only the failed attempts, but you must understand that each attempt moves you forward. Each experiment, successful or not, is progress. Each failure is actually a step closer to success. Start practicing this mindset today. After each unsuccessful attempt at anything, ask yourself, what did I learn? What do I understand now that I didn't before? What possibilities have I eliminated? These questions transform apparent failures into clear progress. Remember, progress isn't always linear. Sometimes you have to go sideways, or even seem to go backward, to ultimately move forward. But as long as you're learning, as long as you're eliminating possibilities, as long as you're refining your understanding, you're making progress. This is the inventor's secret. There is no such thing as a step backward if you're learning from it. Every attempt, every experiment, every seeming failure moves you forward if you have the wisdom to see it and learn from it. Let me share with you one of the most valuable lessons I've learned in my years of invention. Your worth is not measured by your outcomes. This isn't just feel-good philosophy. It's a practical principle that allowed me to persist through thousands of unsuccessful experiments without losing my drive or determination. You see, most people make a dangerous mistake. They tie their self-worth to their results. When an experiment fails, they feel like a failure. When a project doesn't work, they question their abilities. When an idea falls flat, they doubt their intelligence. This is the surest way to paralyze your progress and stifle your innovation. In my laboratory, I made it clear to every worker, we are not our experiments. When a test failed, and thousands did, it wasn't a reflection on the researcher, it was simply data. When a prototype didn't work, and most didn't, it wasn't a judgment of our capabilities. It was information about what didn't work. Let me tell you about the time we were working on the carbon telephone transmitter. Experiment after experiment failed. The pressure was enormous. The entire telephone industry was waiting for a solution. Lesser inventors might have taken each failure personally, might have started questioning their abilities. But I knew better. Each failed attempt wasn't a reflection of our worth. It was simply another step in the process of discovery. Here's what you need to understand. An outcome is just an outcome. It's not a measure of your intelligence, your potential, or your worth as a human being. When you truly internalize this, something remarkable happens. You become free to experiment boldly, to try radical solutions, to push boundaries without fear of personal judgment. Think about it this way. When a scientist conducts an experiment, the results don't define the scientist's worth. They simply provide information about the experiment itself. This is how you must think about your own attempts and efforts. They are external events separate from your core identity and worth. Let me give you a practical framework for maintaining this separation. First, develop the habit of objective observation. When something doesn't work, describe it purely in terms of what happened, not what it means about you. Instead of "I failed again," say, "The experiment produced unexpected results." Instead of "I'm not good enough," say, "This approach needs modification." In my work, I never allowed myself or my team to use phrases like "I'm a failure" or "I'm not cut out for this." These weren't just banned because they were discouraging. They were banned because they were inaccurate. The outcome of an experiment tells you nothing about your worth as a person or your potential for future success. Here's another crucial point. Your value lies in your capacity to learn and adapt, not in any single outcome. When we were working on the light bulb, each unsuccessful attempt didn't diminish our worth. It increased it. Why? Because with each attempt we gained knowledge, understanding, and experience. Our value was in our growing capability, not in any individual result. This separation of self from outcome allows you to analyze results objectively. When you're not defending your ego, you can see clearly what worked and what didn't. When you're not protecting your self-image, you can learn from every attempt without emotional interference. Let me share a personal practice. At the end of each day in my laboratory, I would review our experiments not as successes or failures, but as data points in our ongoing journey of discovery. This wasn't just a mental trick. It was a practical approach that allowed me to maintain perspective and continue pushing forward, despite what others might have seen as defeats. Here's something vital. This separation of self from outcome doesn't mean you don't care about results. Of course you care. But you care as a scientist observing an experiment, not as someone whose worth hangs in the balance with each attempt. Start practicing this today. When something doesn't work out as planned, notice your self-talk. Are you making it mean something about you as a person? Catch yourself. Redirect your thinking to objective observation. What happened? What can you learn? What will you try next? Remember, you are not your outcomes. You are not your successes. You are not your failures. You are the inventor, the experimenter, the explorer. Your worth lies in your capacity to learn, to grow, to persist, to try again. Everything else is just data. This isn't just philosophy. It's practical psychology for innovation. When you separate your self-worth from your outcomes, you free yourself to experiment boldly, to learn deeply, and to persist indefinitely. This is how breakthroughs happen. This is how innovation occurs. This is how progress is made. Let me tell you something that might shock you. In my laboratory, we celebrated our failures, not with quiet resignation, but with loud enthusiasm. We failed boldly, we failed quickly, and we failed with purpose. This wasn't recklessness. It was strategy. You see, most people try to tiptoe around failure. They make small, cautious attempts. They test the waters with their toe instead of diving in. They try to minimize their failures, to hide them, to avoid them. But here's what I learned. The faster you fail, the faster you succeed. In my work on the electric light, we didn't conduct careful, timid experiments. We tested materials aggressively. We pushed voltages to their limits. We deliberately caused filaments to burn out. Why? Because each dramatic failure taught us more than a dozen cautious attempts ever could. Here's what most people don't understand about failure. It's not your enemy, it's your accelerator. The faster you can fail, the faster you can eliminate what doesn't work. The more dramatically you fail, the more clearly you can see why something doesn't work. Let me give you an example from my laboratory. When testing new filament materials, we didn't gradually increase the current. We subjected them to full power immediately. Why? Because this immediate dramatic failure told us more about the material's properties than hours of gradual testing would have revealed. This approach, failing fast and failing loud, accelerates your progress exponentially. Think about it. Would you rather spend a year making careful, timid attempts or a month of aggressive experimentation that reveals the same information? Here's how to implement this principle. First, identify what you're trying to learn. Then, design experiments that will give you clear, unmistakable results, even if those results are failures. Don't be afraid to push boundaries. Don't be afraid to break things. Don't be afraid to fail spectacularly. In my laboratory, we had a saying, if it's going to fail, let's make it fail big. This wasn't about being destructive. It was about being instructive. A dramatic failure often reveals weaknesses, flaws, and opportunities that might have remained hidden in more cautious testing. Let me tell you about our work on the storage battery. We didn't just test different materials. We subjected them to extreme conditions, high temperatures, excessive charges, rapid discharge cycles. Why? Because these extreme conditions showed us exactly where and how each design would fail. This accelerated our understanding exponentially. Here's another crucial point. Failing fast doesn't mean being careless. It means being strategic about your failures. Document everything. Analyze every failure. Learn from every dramatic result. The goal isn't just to fail. It's to fail in ways that teach you something valuable. Think about it this way. Every failure is going to happen eventually. The question is, do you want to discover these failures slowly through careful, timid experimentation, or quickly through bold, purposeful testing? The answer will determine your rate of progress. Let me give you a practical framework for implementing this approach. First, identify the key variables in your experiment or project. Then, instead of testing them gradually, push them to their limits. Don't wait for failure to find you. Go out and find it. Force it to reveal itself quickly and clearly. In my work on the phonograph, we deliberately tested materials until they broke. We intentionally pushed mechanisms until they failed. Each dramatic failure taught us exactly what we needed to know about the limits and capabilities of our designs. Here's something vital. When you fail fast and fail loud, you also fail forward. Each dramatic failure eliminates multiple possibilities at once. Each spectacular setback teaches you more than a dozen minor mishaps. Each bold experiment accelerates your progress toward success. Start practicing this today. Whatever project you're working on, stop being timid with your experiments. Stop trying to avoid failure. Instead, design tests that will give you clear, unmistakable results, even if those results are failures. Push boundaries, test limits, force failures to reveal themselves quickly. Remember, the goal isn't to fail for failure's sake. The goal is to accelerate your learning through bold experimentation, to compress months of gradual discovery into days of dramatic revelation, to turn failure from something you avoid into something you use. This is how real innovation happens. not through careful, timid steps, but through bold, purposeful experimentation. Not by avoiding failure, but by forcing it to reveal itself quickly and clearly. Not by tiptoeing around the edges, but by diving deep into the unknown. Let me share with you one of the most counterintuitive secrets of innovation. Wrong answers are often more valuable than right ones. In my laboratory, we celebrated wrong answers with almost as much enthusiasm as we celebrated our breakthroughs. Let me tell you why. You see, most people have it backwards. They think success is finding the right answer. But in innovation, success is often about eliminating the wrong answers until the right one becomes inevitable. Each wrong answer is a gift. It clears the path, narrows the field, and brings you closer to breakthrough. Think about our work on the light bulb. Each material that didn't work as a filament was a victory. Each failure was a celebration. Why? Because each eliminated possibility brought us closer to the one that would work. Every wrong answer was a stepping stone to the right one. Here's what most people don't understand. In the realm of innovation, wrong answers are not mistakes, they're eliminations. They're not failures, they're clarifications. Each wrong answer tells you something vital about what the right answer must be. Let me give you an example from my work on the storage battery. Every material combination that failed taught us something specific about what we needed. Each wrong answer revealed another requirement for the right solution. These weren't setbacks. They were guideposts leading us to success. This is why I never understood inventors who became discouraged by wrong answers. Each wrong answer is a gift of clarity. Each failure is a piece of the puzzle. Each mistake brings you closer to mastery. Here's how to start celebrating wrong answers. First, stop seeing them as failures. Start seeing them as eliminations. Each wrong answer removes another possibility from the field, making your next attempt more likely to succeed. This isn't just positive thinking. It's mathematical reality. In my laboratory, we kept careful records of every wrong answer. Why? Because wrong answers contain valuable information. They tell you what doesn't work and often why it doesn't work. This information is pure gold in the pursuit of innovation. Let me tell you something crucial. The more wrong answers you collect, the clearer the path to the right answer becomes. It's like solving a maze. Each dead end you discover makes the correct path more obvious. Each wrong turn eliminates another possibility. Think about it this way. If there are 100 possible solutions to a problem and you've eliminated 90 wrong ones, you're not failing. You're 90% closer to success. Each wrong answer is progress. Each mistake is momentum. Here's another vital point. Wrong answers often reveal patterns that lead to breakthrough insights. When we were working on the phonograph, the pattern of our failures taught us more than our occasional successes. The wrong answers showed us what the right answer needed to be. Start practicing this mindset today. When you get a wrong answer, don't get discouraged. Instead, ask yourself, what does this eliminate? What does this clarify? What does this wrong answer tell me about what the right answer must be? In my work, I developed a systematic approach to wrong answers. First, document them meticulously. Second, analyze why they're wrong. Third, extract the lesson or insight from each wrong answer. Fourth, use that information to inform your next attempt. Remember, every wrong answer has value. Every mistake contains information. Every failure holds a lesson. The key is learning to extract that value, to mine that information, to capture that lesson. Let me tell you about a practice we had in my laboratory. Whenever an experiment failed spectacularly, we would gather around and ask, what did this wrong answer teach us? This wasn't just ritual, it was methodology. It turned what others might see as failures into valuable data points. Here's something most people miss about wrong answers. They often tell you more than right answers. A right answer tells you one way something works. A wrong answer can tell you dozens of ways something doesn't work and why. This information is invaluable in the pursuit of innovation. Start celebrating your wrong answers today. Document them, study them, learn from them. Each one is a step forward, a piece of the puzzle, a clarification of the path ahead. This isn't just theory. This is how real innovation happens. Remember, the path to breakthrough is paved with wrong answers. The more you collect, the closer you get to success. Don't avoid them. Don't fear them. Celebrate them. They're your stepping stones to break through. Let me tell you something about confidence that most people get completely wrong. They think confidence comes before action. They're waiting to feel confident before they start. They're waiting for certainty before they begin. But I learned something vital in my years of invention. Confidence doesn't precede action. It follows it. When I first started working on the electric light, do you think I felt confident? Do you think I had certainty? Of course not. What I had was determination. What I had was curiosity. What I had was a willingness to act despite uncertainty. And that's where real confidence begins. Here's what most people don't understand. Confidence isn't a prerequisite for action. It's a product of action. It's not something you wait for. It's something you build through consistent effort and repeated attempts. In my laboratory, I didn't hire people who claimed to be confident. I hired people who were willing to act, to try, to experiment, even when they weren't sure of the outcome. Why? Because I knew that real confidence would develop through their work, through their experiments, through their failures and successes. Let me give you a practical example. When we started working on the phonograph, nobody had ever captured and reproduced sound before. There was no reason to be confident it would work. But we didn't wait for confidence. We acted. We experimented. We tried, and with each attempt, even the unsuccessful ones, our confidence grew. This is the secret. Action builds confidence. Experience builds confidence. Even failure builds confidence, because each failure teaches you something, makes you stronger, makes you more capable. Think about it this way. Every time you try something, whether you succeed or fail, you learn, you grow, you develop capability. And capability is the foundation of genuine confidence. Not the false confidence of untested assumptions, but the real confidence that comes from experience. Here's how to start building confidence through action. First, stop waiting to feel ready. Stop waiting to feel confident. Instead, choose one. Small action you can take today. One experiment you can try. One attempt you can make. In my work, I never waited until I felt completely ready before starting a new project. If I had, most of my inventions would never have existed. Instead, I started with what I knew, acted on what I could do, and built confidence through experience. Let me tell you something crucial. Confidence isn't the absence of fear or uncertainty. It's the ability to act despite them. It's the knowledge that you can handle whatever results come from your actions, success or failure. When we were working on the motion picture camera, every step was uncertain. Every attempt was a venture into unknown territory. But each action we took, each experiment we conducted, each failure we encountered, all of it built our confidence, our capability, our understanding. Here's another vital point. Confidence isn't built through success alone. It's built through resilience, through the knowledge that you can fail and still continue, through the understanding that setbacks are temporary and survivable. Start practicing this today. Instead of waiting to feel confident, take action. Start small if you need to, but start. Make that first attempt. Run that first experiment. Take that first step. Your confidence will grow from there. Remember, every expert was once a beginner. Every inventor once made their first attempt. Every innovation started with someone willing to act without certainty of success. In my laboratory, we had a saying, "The only way to build confidence is to build something." It didn't matter if what we built worked or not. The act of building, of trying, of experimenting, that's what built our confidence. Here's something most people miss about confidence. It's not a feeling you wait for. It's a capacity you develop. You develop it through action, through experience, through facing and overcoming challenges. Let me give you a practical framework. Start with small actions. Document your attempts. Learn from your results. Build on your experience. Each step, each attempt, each experiment adds to your foundation of confidence. The beauty of this approach is that it creates a positive cycle. Action leads to experience. Experience leads to capability. Capability leads to confidence. Confidence makes further action easier, and the cycle continues. Remember, the greatest enemy of confidence is inaction. Waiting doesn't build confidence. Acting does. Thinking about it doesn't build confidence. Doing it does. Planning doesn't build confidence. Experimenting does. This is how real innovation happens. Not through waiting for confidence, but through building it through action. Not through avoiding uncertainty, but through embracing it as part of the process. Not through seeking perfection, but through persistent effort and continuous learning. Let me tell you about a principle that revolutionized my approach to invention. Sometimes you have to break something to make it better. This isn't about destruction, it's about understanding. It's about pushing limits. It's about finding the breaking point so you can push beyond it. In my laboratory, we didn't just test things, we broke them. Deliberately, systematically, purposefully. We pushed materials until they failed, stressed components until they broke, exceeded limits until systems collapsed. Why? Because the point of failure teaches you more than 1,000 successful tests. Most people try to protect their work, their ideas, their creations from breaking. They operate safely within known limits. They stay comfortably within established boundaries. But here's what I learned. The most valuable insights often come from pushing past those limits, from finding and exceeding the breaking point. When we were developing the light bulb, we didn't just test filaments at normal operating conditions. We deliberately overloaded them. We pushed voltages beyond reasonable limits. We subjected materials to extreme conditions. Each breakdown taught us something vital about the materials, about their limits, about what we needed to improve. Here's what most people don't understand. Breaking points are learning points. When something breaks, it reveals its weaknesses. When a system fails, it shows you exactly what needs to be strengthened. When a limit is reached, you learn precisely what needs to be expanded. Let me give you an example from my work on the phonograph. We didn't just record sounds at normal volumes, we pushed the equipment to its limits. We deliberately caused the stylus to skip, the cylinder to wear, the reproduction to distort. Each failure revealed something crucial about how the system worked and what it needed to work better. Think about it this way. If you never push something to its breaking point, how can you know its true capabilities? How can you understand its limitations? How can you improve its performance? In my laboratory, we had a systematic approach to this principle. First, we'd establish normal operating conditions. Then we'd gradually increase stress until failure occurred. Finally, and this is crucial, we'd analyze exactly how and why the break happened. This wasn't destruction for destruction's sake. It was deliberate investigation through controlled failure. Here's something vital. When you break something purposefully, you learn not just where it breaks, but how it breaks. This information is invaluable for improvement. It shows you exactly what needs to be strengthened, modified, or redesigned. Let me tell you about our work on the storage battery. We didn't just test batteries under normal conditions. We deliberately pushed them to failure. We overcharged them. We rapid cycled them. We subjected them to temperature extremes. Each failure taught us something new about battery chemistry, about material interactions, about what needed to be improved. Start practicing this principle today. Take something you're working on and ask, what are its limits? Where might it break? Then, in a controlled way, push it toward those limits. Don't be afraid of the breaking point. That's where the real learning begins. Remember, this isn't about reckless destruction. It's about purposeful investigation. It's about understanding limits so you can exceed them. It's about finding weaknesses so you can eliminate them. Here's another crucial point. When you deliberately break something, you control the conditions. You can observe exactly what happens. You can document precisely how failure occurs. This is far more valuable than waiting for something to break unexpectedly in the field. In my work, I've found that most significant improvements come not from subtle refinements, but from understanding and addressing fundamental limitations. And you can't understand those limitations until you find them, until you push hard enough to make something break. Let me give you a practical framework for this approach. First, identify what you want to improve. Second, determine what might cause it to fail. Third, systematically push it towards those failure points. Fourth, carefully observe and document how failure occurs. Finally, use that information to make improvements. This principle applies beyond just physical inventions. It works for systems, for processes, for methods, for ideas. Sometimes you have to break your assumptions to improve your understanding. Sometimes you have to break your habits to improve your performance. Sometimes you have to break your limits to improve your capabilities. Remember, breaking points are not end points. They're starting points for improvement. They're not failures to be avoided. They're opportunities to be embraced. They're not disasters to be feared. They're data to be studied. This is how real innovation happens, not through careful preservation of what exists, but through deliberate investigation of its limits, not through avoiding failure, but through controlling and learning from it, not through staying safely within boundaries, but through purposefully pushing beyond them. Let me tell you about the most powerful force in innovation, a vision so compelling that it makes failures seem insignificant. When I envisioned lighting up entire cities with electricity, individual failed experiments became mere footnotes in a much greater story. This wasn't just positive thinking, it was practical power. You see, most people let their failures define their vision. They adjust their dreams downward with each setback. They shrink their ambitions to match their current results. But I learned something vital. When your vision is big enough, failures become small by comparison. Think about my work on electric light. Do you think 10,000 failed attempts could discourage someone who saw entire cities illuminated by electric light? Could daily setbacks deter someone who envisioned factories, homes, and streets freed from the darkness? Of course not. The vision was too compelling, too important, too transformative to be overshadowed by temporary failures. Here's what most people don't understand. The size of your vision determines the impact of your failures. When your vision is small, every failure feels enormous. When your vision is massive, even significant failures feel manageable. It's all about perspective. Let me give you an example from my work on the phonograph. When we were trying to capture sound for the first time in human history, do you think broken cylinders or failed recordings could dampen our spirits? No, because we weren't just trying to make a machine work. We were trying to preserve human voices for eternity. That vision made every failure feel tiny in comparison. This is why I always started with the biggest possible vision. Not because I was unrealistic, but because I understood that a compelling vision provides the energy to persist through countless failures. It's not about ignoring failures, it's about seeing them in proper perspective. In my laboratory, before we began any major project, I would share the ultimate vision with my team. Not just the immediate technical goals, but the larger impact we were working toward. Why? Because when people understand the magnitude of what they're trying to achieve, individual setbacks lose their power to discourage. Here's something crucial. Your vision must be bigger than your ego. It must be about more than personal success or recognition. When we worked on the electric light, it wasn't about Thomas Edison becoming famous. It was about transforming human civilization. That kind of vision puts personal setbacks in their proper place. Think about it this way. If you're trying to climb a mountain, each stumble feels huge if you're focused on your feet. But if you keep your eyes on the summit, those same stumbles become merely part of the journey. The size of your vision determines the size of your failures. Let me tell you about our work on the storage battery. For years, we faced setback after setback. But our vision wasn't just about creating a better battery. It was about revolutionizing transportation, about freeing vehicles from the limitations of gasoline. That vision made each failure feel like a small price to pay for the potential breakthrough. Start practicing this principle today. Before you begin any project, define your largest possible vision, not just what you're trying to build or create, but the ultimate impact it could have. Make it so compelling that individual failures feel insignificant in comparison. Here's another vital point. Your vision must be clear enough to persist through failure, but flexible enough to adapt based on what you learn. When we worked on electric light, our ultimate vision, illuminating the world, remained constant, but our technical approach evolved based on our failures. Remember, the purpose of a grand vision isn't to ignore reality. It's to put setbacks in perspective. It's to provide the emotional fuel needed to persist through failures. It's to maintain enthusiasm when results are disappointing. In my work, I found that people don't burn out from too many failures. They burn out from too small a vision. When your vision is big enough, failure becomes merely feedback. When your purpose is compelling enough, setbacks become stepping stones. Let me give you a practical framework. First, define your ultimate vision, the biggest possible impact of your work. Second, connect every daily task to that larger vision. Third, when failures occur, immediately redirect your attention to the larger purpose you're serving. This isn't just theory. This is how real innovation happens, not through avoiding failure, but through having a vision so compelling that failures lose their power to discourage. Not through being unrealistic about setbacks, but through seeing them in the context of a larger purpose. Remember, your vision must be bigger than your failures. Your purpose must be more compelling than your setbacks. Your sense of mission must be stronger than your fear of failure. When you have this, you become unstoppable, not because you never fail, but because failures no longer have the power to stop you. Let me share with you one of the most powerful practices that transformed my work, recording everything, not just the successes, not just the breakthroughs, but every experiment, every failure, every observation. This wasn't just about keeping notes. It was about creating a map of discovery that would guide us to breakthrough. In my laboratory, we filled thousands of notebooks. Every test, every result, every unexpected occurrence was documented. Why? Because I learned early on that memory is unreliable, but documentation is invaluable. The smallest observation today might be the key to breakthrough tomorrow. Most people trust their memory. They think they'll remember the important details. They believe they'll recall crucial observations. But here's what I learned through years of invention. The human mind is brilliant at making connections, but terrible at storing details. That's why systematic documentation is essential. When we were working on the light bulb, we documented everything: the type of filament, the vacuum pressure, the voltage applied, the duration of the test, the mode of failure. Every detail, no matter how insignificant it seemed at the time. And you know what? Time and again, it was these seemingly minor details that led to major breakthroughs. Here's what most people don't understand about documentation. It's not just about recording what happened. It's about creating patterns of understanding. When you document everything, patterns emerge. Connections become visible. Insights surface that would have remained hidden. Let me give you an example from my work on the phonograph. By documenting every test, every adjustment, every failure, we began to see patterns in how different materials responded to sound vibrations. These patterns, visible only through systematic documentation, led us to breakthrough solutions. Think about it this way. Each experiment, each test, each failure is like a piece of a puzzle. In isolation, it might seem meaningless, but when documented and connected with other pieces, it forms part of a larger picture that leads to innovation. In my laboratory, we had a strict system for documentation. Every notebook entry included the date, the specific conditions, the materials used, the results observed, And this is crucial, any unexpected occurrences. Why? Because often it's the unexpected that leads to breakthrough. Here's something vital. Documentation isn't just about recording successes or failures. It's about capturing the process itself. The dead ends you encountered, the assumptions you questioned, the surprises you discovered. This comprehensive record becomes a invaluable resource for future innovation. Let me tell you about our work on the storage battery. For years, we documented every experiment, every chemical combination, every reaction. This massive database of information eventually revealed patterns that led to our breakthrough. Without thorough documentation, these patterns would have remained invisible. Start practicing this principle today. Get a notebook, physical or digital, and start recording everything about your work. Not just the results, but the process. Not just the successes, but the failures. Not just the expected, but especially the unexpected. Here's another crucial point. Documentation isn't just about creating a record, it's about creating a resource. When you document everything, you build a database of experience that you can draw upon for future innovation. You create a map that others can follow. Remember, your documentation system should be systematic, but not burdensome. It should be detailed but accessible. It should be comprehensive but organized. The goal is to create a useful resource, not just accumulate information. In my work, I found that the most valuable insights often came from reviewing old documentation. Patterns that weren't visible in the moment became clear when looking back through detailed records. Solutions to current problems often emerged from past documentation. Let me give you a practical framework for documentation. First, create a standard format for your records. Include date, conditions, materials, procedures, results, and observations. Second, make documentation a daily habit. Third, regularly review your records to identify patterns and insights. This isn't just about being organized, it's about creating a tool for innovation. Your documentation becomes a database of experience, a record of learning, a map of discovery that guides you toward breakthrough. Here's something most people miss about documentation. It's not just about recording what worked or didn't work. It's about capturing your thinking process, your assumptions, your questions, your insights. This mental record is often as valuable as the technical details. Remember, in the world of innovation, documentation is not bureaucracy, it's strategy. It's not busy work, it's breakthrough work. It's not about creating paperwork, it's about creating patterns that lead to discovery. Let me tell you about a principle that most inventors never understand: the power of failing in public. My laboratory wasn't a secret bunker, it was open, visible, and transparent. We didn't hide our failures, we displayed them. We didn't whisper about our setbacks. We discussed them openly. This wasn't just about transparency, it was about accelerating innovation. Most people try to hide their failures. They work in secret until they achieve success. They keep their struggles private, their setbacks hidden, their mistakes concealed. But here's what I learned. Public failure is powerful. It's instructive. It's transformative. In my laboratory at Menlo Park, journalists were often present. The public could visit. Other inventors could observe. Why? Because I understood that innovation doesn't thrive in isolation. It grows through sharing, through openness, through the collective learning that comes from public failure. Think about our work on the electric light. We didn't just fail thousands of times, we failed thousands of times with the world watching. Newspapers reported our setbacks, critics mocked our attempts, competitors observed our struggles. And you know what? This public pressure didn't hinder us, it helped us. Here's what most people don't understand about public failure. It's not about embarrassment, it's about engagement. When you fail in public, you create opportunities for collaboration. You invite input from unexpected sources. You build a community around your work. Let me give you an example from my work on the phonograph. We didn't perfect it in secret and then reveal it to the world. We developed it openly, sharing our failures and breakthroughs alike. This openness attracted other minds, other perspectives, other ideas that contributed to our success. Think about it this way. When you fail in private, you learn alone. When you fail in public, you create opportunities for collective learning. Your failures become teaching moments, not just for you, but for everyone watching and learning alongside you. In my laboratory, we made our failures visible. We displayed failed experiments. We kept broken prototypes. We discussed unsuccessful attempts openly. Why? Because each visible failure was a lesson, not just for us, but for anyone who might build upon our work. Here's something crucial. Failing in public requires courage. It demands that you value progress over pride, learning over looking good, innovation over ego. But this courage is rewarded with accelerated learning and unexpected collaboration. Let me tell you about our work on the storage battery. We didn't just document our failures, we shared them with other researchers. We published our unsuccessful attempts. We opened our laboratory to those who wanted to learn from our mistakes. This openness accelerated not just our progress, but the progress of the entire field. Start practicing this principle today. Share your work before it's perfect. Discuss your struggles openly. Document your failures publicly. Create opportunities for others to learn from your setbacks and contribute to your progress. Here's another vital point. Public failure builds credibility. When people see your struggles, they trust your successes more. When they witness your journey, they value your achievements more. When they understand your process, they respect your innovations more. Remember, public failure isn't about seeking attention or sympathy. It's about creating opportunities for learning, collaboration, and acceleration. It's about building a community around your work. It's about transforming personal setbacks into collective stepping stones. In my work, I found that public failure often led to unexpected breakthroughs. Someone watching our struggles would offer a suggestion. Someone reading about our setbacks would share a relevant experience. Someone observing our work would contribute a crucial insight. Let me give you a practical framework for failing in public. First, document your journey openly. Share your process, not just your results. Second, create spaces for dialogue about your work. Third, invite input and feedback, especially when things aren't working. This isn't just about being transparent. It's about being transformative. When you fail in public, you transform personal setbacks into public learning opportunities. You turn individual struggles into collective progress. You convert private failures into public stepping stones. Here's something most people miss about public failure. It's not just about sharing what didn't work. It's about sharing why it didn't work. It's about creating a narrative of learning that others can follow and build upon. Remember, innovation doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens in the open, where ideas can be shared, where failures can be examined, where learning can be collective. Don't hide your failures. Share them. Don't protect your struggles. Publish them. Don't conceal your journey. Celebrate it. Let me share with you one of the most powerful principles of innovation. Never stop building. In my laboratory, the moment one prototype failed, we were already building the next one. Before the smoke cleared from one unsuccessful experiment, we were setting up another. This wasn't just about being busy. It was about maintaining momentum. Most people pause after failure. They step back to analyze. They wait to recover. They hesitate to try again. But here's what I learned. The best way to overcome failure is to build something new immediately. Don't pause. Prototype. Don't wait. Work. Don't hesitate. Create. In my work on the light bulb, we didn't just try one filament after another. We had multiple experiments running simultaneously. While one prototype was being tested, another was being built. When one failed, we already had the next one ready. This constant forward motion was crucial to our success. Here's what most people don't understand about prototyping. It's not just about creating something new, it's about maintaining momentum. When you're always building the next prototype, failure loses its power to stop you. It becomes just another step in the process. Think about it this way. Every prototype, successful or not, teaches you something. Every version, working or broken, adds to your understanding. Every iteration, perfect or flawed, moves you forward. The key is to keep building, keep creating, keep moving forward. Let me give you an example from my work on the phonograph. Each prototype we built incorporated what we learned from the previous one. Each version, even if it failed, informed the next one. The continuous process of building and rebuilding was itself the path to innovation. In my laboratory, we had a rule: never end the day with a failure. If an experiment failed in the afternoon, we started building the next prototype immediately. Why? Because momentum is precious in innovation. Once you stop, it's harder to start again. Here's something crucial. Prototyping isn't about perfection, it's about progress. Each version doesn't need to be dramatically better than the last. It just needs to incorporate what you've learned. Small improvements made consistently lead to breakthrough innovations. Remember, the goal of each prototype isn't to achieve final success. It's to learn something new. Each version is an experiment, a question, a hypothesis to be tested. The faster you build and test, the faster you learn and progress. Let me tell you about our work on the storage battery. We built thousands of prototypes, each one slightly different from the last. Each version taught us something, showed us something, revealed something. The continuous process of building and testing was our path to breakthrough. Start practicing this principle today. When something doesn't work, don't pause to recover. Start building the next version immediately. Don't wait for perfect ideas. Build to learn. Don't hesitate for fear of failure. Prototype to progress. Here's another vital point. Each prototype should be quick and rough. Don't waste time perfecting something that's meant for learning. Build it, test it, learn from it, and move on to the next version. Speed of iteration is more important than perfection of execution. In my work, I found that the simple act of building something new immediately after a failure had a powerful psychological effect. It kept the team focused on the future rather than dwelling on the past. It maintained energy and enthusiasm even through difficult periods. Think about prototyping as a conversation with your work. Each version you build asks a question. Each test provides an answer. Each failure points the way to the next attempt. The key is to keep the conversation going, to maintain the dialogue between idea and execution. Let me give you a practical framework for continuous prototyping. First, always have the next version planned. Second, start building it before the current one fails. Third, incorporate learning quickly. Don't wait for perfect understanding. This isn't just about being productive, it's about being progressive. Each prototype moves you forward whether it succeeds or fails. Each version adds to your understanding whether it works or breaks. Each iteration brings you closer to breakthrough, whether you can see it yet or not. Here's something most people miss about prototyping. It's not just about the physical act of building. It's about maintaining mental momentum. When you're always building the next version, failure becomes just another form of feedback. Setbacks become set up for the next attempt. Remember, in innovation, momentum is everything. The simple act of building something new, especially right after a failure, keeps you moving forward. Don't let failure stop you. Don't let setbacks pause you. Build, learn, and build again. That's how breakthroughs happen. Let me tell you about one of the hardest but most crucial lessons in innovation: learning to let go. In my years of invention, I've had to abandon countless ideas, scrap numerous prototypes, and release deeply held beliefs about what would work. This wasn't just about being practical. It was about being progressive. Most people become emotionally attached to their ideas. They hold on to approaches that aren't working. They cling to solutions that have proven ineffective. But here's what I learned. Sometimes the greatest progress comes from letting go of what isn't working. even if you've invested heavily in it. In my laboratory, we had a principle: no idea was too sacred to abandon if evidence showed it wasn't working. This wasn't about being callous. It was about being committed to progress rather than to any particular approach to achieving it. Think about our work on the light bulb. Do you know how many promising ideas we had to abandon? How many seemingly brilliant approaches we had to let go? Each time it was difficult. Each time it felt like giving up. But each time it freed us to explore new possibilities that ultimately led to success. Here's what most people don't understand about letting go. It's not about giving up. It's about moving forward. When you hold on to approaches that aren't working, you block yourself from discovering approaches that might. When you cling to failed solutions, you close yourself off from finding successful ones. Let me give you an example from my work on the storage battery. We spent months pursuing one particular chemical combination that seemed promising. We had invested time, money, and effort, but when the evidence showed it wouldn't work, we had to let it go. That decision, though difficult, freed us to explore the direction that ultimately led to breakthrough. Think about it this way. Every idea you hold on to that isn't working is taking up space where a better idea could be. Every approach you cling to that isn't producing results is consuming resources that could be used for more promising approaches. In my laboratory, we developed a systematic approach to letting go. We set clear criteria for what constituted progress. We established timelines for evaluation. We created processes for deciding when to abandon an approach. This wasn't about being impatient, it was about being objective. Here's something crucial. Letting go doesn't mean you've failed. It means you've learned. Every abandoned approach teaches you something valuable. Every released idea clarifies your understanding of what won't work, and therefore what might. Let me tell you about our work on the phonograph. We had to abandon numerous promising-seeming approaches. Each time it felt like starting over. But each time we let go of something that wasn't working, we created space for something that would. Start practicing this principle today. Look at your current projects. What are you holding on to that isn't working? What approaches are you clinging to despite evidence they're ineffective? What ideas have you become emotionally attached to that might be blocking progress? Here's another vital point. Letting go becomes easier when you understand that no effort is wasted. Every abandoned approach, every discarded idea, every released solution contributes to your understanding. They're not failures, they're eliminations that bring you closer to success. Remember, the goal isn't to make any particular approach work. The goal is to achieve the desired result. Sometimes that means letting go of one path to discover another. Sometimes it means releasing what you thought would work to find what actually will. In my work, I found that the ability to let go often distinguished successful inventors from unsuccessful ones. Those who could release failed approaches quickly and move on to new possibilities were the ones who ultimately achieved breakthrough results. Let me give you a practical framework for letting go. First, establish clear criteria for progress. Second, set specific timelines for evaluation. Third, create objective processes for deciding when to abandon an approach. Fourth, maintain documentation of what you've learned from each released idea. This isn't just about being decisive, it's about being progressive. When you learn to let go of what isn't working, you free yourself to find what will. When you release failed approaches, you create space for successful ones. When you abandon dead-end paths, you open yourself to discovering new ones. Here's something most people miss about letting go. It's not just about releasing failed approaches. It's about maintaining momentum. When you hold on to things that aren't working, you slow yourself down. When you learn to let go, you maintain the forward motion that's crucial for innovation. Remember, in the world of invention, attachment to ideas is often the enemy of progress. Learn to let go of what isn't working. Learn to release what isn't producing results. Learn to abandon approaches that have proven ineffective. That's how you create space for breakthrough innovation. Let me tell you about the most powerful state of mind for innovation: creating without fear. When you truly overcome your fear of failure, your creativity explodes, your innovation accelerates, your possibilities expand exponentially. This isn't just about feeling better, it's about inventing better. Most people create with one foot on the brake. They hold back, they play it safe. They let fear limit their imagination and constrain their experiments. But here's what I learned: fearless. Creation isn't reckless, it's revolutionary. It's not about ignoring risks, it's about transcending them. In my laboratory at Menlo Park, we created an environment where fear had no place. Not because we were reckless, but because we understood that fear is the enemy of innovation. When you're afraid of failure, you can't create freely. When you're worried about mistakes, you can't experiment boldly. Think about our work on the electric light. Do you think we could have tried 10,000 different materials if we were afraid of failure? Could we have pursued such radical ideas if we were constrained by fear? Of course not. Our fearlessness wasn't just an attitude, it was a crucial tool for innovation. Here's what most people don't understand about fearless creation. It's not about being brave. It's about being free. Free to try unusual approaches. Free to question assumptions. Free to pursue possibilities that others might consider ridiculous. Let me give you an example from my work on the phonograph. When we first proposed the idea of capturing sound, people said it was impossible. If we had listened to those fears, if we had been constrained by conventional wisdom, we would never have created something revolutionary. Think about it this way. Every truly innovative idea seems impossible at first. Every breakthrough invention appears unrealistic initially. If you let fear guide your creation, you'll never push beyond the boundaries of what's already known. In my laboratory, we had a saying: fear is more expensive than failure. Why? Because fear prevents you from trying. Fear stops you from experimenting. Fear keeps you from discovering what's possible. The cost of fear isn't just the failures you experience, it's the attempts you never make. Here's something crucial. Creating without fear doesn't mean creating without thought. It means your creativity is guided by possibility, rather than constrained by fear. It means your experiments are limited only by physics, not by anxiety. Let me tell you about our work on the storage battery. We tried combinations that experts said were foolish. We pursued approaches that others thought were wasteful. We explored possibilities that conventional wisdom said were impossible. This wasn't about being reckless. It was about being unlimited. Start practicing fearless creation today. Notice when fear's holding you back. Pay attention to when anxiety is limiting your creativity. Observe when worry is constraining your experiments. Then consciously choose to create beyond those limitations. Here's another vital point. Fearless creation is contagious. When one person in a team starts creating without fear, others become bolder. When one experiment breaks conventional boundaries, other experiments become more daring. When one innovation transcends traditional limits, other innovations become more revolutionary. Remember, fear is subtle. It doesn't always show up as obvious anxiety. Sometimes it appears as reasonable caution. Sometimes it masks itself as practical thinking. Sometimes it disguises itself as realistic planning. Learn to recognize these disguises and create beyond them. In my work, I found that the most significant breakthroughs often came when we were creating at the edge of what seemed possible. Not because we were being reckless, but because we refused to let fear define what was possible. Let me give you a practical framework for fearless creation. First, identify your creative fears. Second, consciously choose to create beyond them. Third, build momentum through successive fearless experiments. Fourth, celebrate the freedom that comes from transcending creative limitations. This isn't just about courage, it's about capacity. When you create without fear, you access your full creative potential. When you innovate without anxiety, You tap into your complete innovative capability. When you experiment without worry, you engage your total experimental capacity. Here's something most people miss about fearless creation. It's not a destination, it's a practice. You don't overcome fear once and for all. You choose to create beyond it, experiment by experiment, innovation by innovation, day by day. Remember, in the realm of innovation, fear is more dangerous than failure. Fear stops you before you start. Fear limits you before you try. Fear constrains you before you create. But when you learn to create without fear, your possibilities become truly limitless. Let me tell you something crucial about breakthrough moments. They often come right after what feels like your biggest failure. I've seen it happen countless times in my laboratory. The moment of greatest disappointment is often the prelude to the greatest discovery. But here's the key. You have to be prepared to recognize and receive these breakthroughs. Most people give up too soon. They quit right before the breakthrough moment. They abandon their efforts just as success is about to dawn. But here's what I learned. Breakthrough moments aren't random. They're the culmination of persistent, prepared effort. In my laboratory, we developed a deep understanding of this principle. We knew that each failure, each setback, each disappointment was potentially the setup for a breakthrough. This wasn't just positive thinking. It was practical experience gained through thousands of experiments. Think about our work on the light bulb. Do you know when the successful filament was finally discovered? It wasn't after a period of encouraging our progress. It was after what felt like our most discouraging series of failures. But we were prepared, we were watching, we were ready. Here's what most people don't understand about breakthroughs. They often disguise themselves as failures. They frequently appear first as disappointments. They usually emerge from what seems like a dead end. The key is being prepared to recognize them when they appear. Let me give you an example from my work on the phonograph. The crucial insight that led to its invention came from what initially seemed like a failure in our telegraph experiments. But because we were prepared, because we were paying attention, we recognized the breakthrough hidden within the apparent failure. Think about it this way. Breakthrough moments are like gold hidden in ore. They rarely present themselves in obvious, gleaming form. They're usually buried within what appears to be worthless rock. But if you're prepared, if you're observant, if you're persistent, you can recognize and extract them. In my laboratory, we had a system for preparing for breakthroughs. We documented everything. We analyzed every failure. We maintained consistent effort even through discouraging periods. Why? Because we understood that breakthroughs come to those who are prepared to receive them. Here's something crucial. Preparation for breakthrough isn't just about technical readiness. It's about mental preparation. It's about emotional resilience. It's about maintaining enthusiasm and attention even when results are disappointing. Let me tell you about our work on the storage battery. The breakthrough came after years of what seemed like failure. But because we were prepared, because we had systems in place to recognize and capitalize on unexpected results, we were able to seize the moment when it arrived. Start preparing for breakthrough today. Document everything. Analyze your failures. Maintain your enthusiasm. Stay alert for unexpected possibilities. Remember, breakthroughs often come disguised as setbacks. You have to be prepared to recognize them. Here's another vital point. Breakthrough moments often require immediate action. When they appear, you need to be ready to pursue them immediately. This means having your resources ready, your mind alert, your energy available. Remember, breakthroughs don't just happen. They're seized by those who are prepared for them. They're recognized by those who are watching for them. They're capitalized upon by those who are ready for them. In my work, I found that the difference between successful and unsuccessful inventors often wasn't their talent or their ideas. It was their preparation for breakthrough moments. The successful ones stayed ready, stayed alert, stayed engaged, even through difficult periods. Let me give you a practical framework for breakthrough preparation. First, Maintain comprehensive documentation of all your efforts. Second, develop systems for analyzing apparent failures. Third, keep your resources ready for immediate action. Fourth, cultivate the emotional resilience to persist through difficult periods. This isn't just about being ready technically, it's about being prepared completely. Mental preparation to recognize breakthrough possibilities. Emotional preparation to persist through difficult periods. Physical preparation to act immediately when opportunity appears. Here's something most people miss about breakthroughs. They often require going against conventional wisdom. When everyone else sees failure, you have to be prepared to see possibility. When others see a dead end, you have to be ready to see a new direction. Think about breakthrough preparation as maintaining a state of receptive readiness. You're not just waiting passively, you're actively preparing. You're not just hoping for success, you're positioning yourself to recognize and seize it when it appears. Remember, the moment of breakthrough often comes right after what feels like ultimate failure. But only those who are prepared, technically, mentally, emotionally, can recognize and seize these moments. Stay ready, stay alert, stay engaged. That's how you turn apparent failure into actual breakthrough. Let me share with you the ultimate secret of innovation: learning to turn failure into fuel. This isn't just about accepting failure or learning from it. It's about transforming it into the very energy that drives you forward. This is the master key that unlocks unlimited innovation. Most people see failure as something that depletes them. It drains their energy. It diminishes their enthusiasm. It decreases their determination. But here's what I learned through years of invention. Failure can be transformed into the most powerful fuel for success. In my laboratory at Menlo Park, we didn't just tolerate failure, we transformed it. Each setback became fuel for our next attempt. Each disappointment energized our next experiment. Each apparent defeat powered our next innovation. This wasn't just philosophy, it was practical alchemy. Think about our work on the light bulb. Those 10,000 failed attempts weren't just experiments that didn't work, they were fuel that powered our pursuit. Each failure energized us. Each setback motivated us. Each unsuccessful attempt drove us forward with greater determination. Here's what most people don't understand about failure. It's not your enemy, it's your energy source. When you learn to transform failure into fuel, every setback makes you stronger. Every defeat makes you more determined. Every unsuccessful attempt makes you more unstoppable. Let me give you an example from my work on the phonograph. Each failed experiment didn't discourage us, it energized us. Why? Because we had learned to transform the frustration of failure into fuel for innovation. The more something didn't work, the more determined we became to make it work. Think about it this way: failure contains enormous energy. Most people let this energy consume them in the form of frustration, disappointment, and discouragement. But when you learn to transform it, this same energy becomes fuel for persistence, creativity, and breakthrough. In my laboratory, we developed a systematic approach to this transformation. We didn't just document failures, we metabolized them. We didn't just analyze setbacks, we converted them into energy for our next attempt. This wasn't just resilience, it was transformation. Here's something crucial. Turning failure into fuel isn't just about attitude, it's about alchemy. It's about actively transforming the energy of disappointment into the power of determination. It's about converting the force of frustration into the fuel of innovation. Let me tell you about our work on the storage battery. Each failed experiment, each unsuccessful test, each disappointing result became fuel for our next attempt. We didn't just bounce back from failure, we powered forward with it. This transformation of failure into fuel was the key to our eventual success. Start practicing this transformation today. When you encounter failure, don't just accept it. Transform it. Don't just learn from it, convert it into energy. Don't just move past it, use it as fuel for your next attempt. Here's another vital point. The more you practice this transformation, the more powerful it becomes. Each time you successfully convert failure into fuel, you become better at the process. Each time you transform disappointment into determination, you strengthen your capacity for innovation. Remember, the energy contained in failure is neutral. It's neither positive nor negative until you transform it. You can let it consume you as frustration, or you can convert it into fuel for success. The choice and the power is yours. In my work, I found that this ability to transform failure into fuel was the ultimate distinguishing factor between those who achieved breakthrough success and those who didn't. It wasn't about who failed less, it was about who could better. Transform failure into forward momentum. Let me give you a practical framework for this transformation. First, recognize the energy contained in each failure. Second, consciously choose to transform this energy rather than be consumed by it. Third, channel this transformed energy into your next attempt. Fourth, build momentum through successive transformations. This isn't just about resilience, it's about transformation. It's not just about bouncing back, it's about powering forward. It's not just about surviving failure, it's about using it as fuel for success. Here's something most people miss about this process. The transformation of failure into fuel isn't just about individual moments, it's about creating a sustainable cycle of innovation. Each transformed failure powers your next attempt, which creates new failures, which provide new fuel, and the cycle continues. Think about failure as potential energy. In its raw form, it can be destructive. But when properly transformed, it becomes the most powerful fuel for innovation. The more you fail, the more fuel you have available. The more setbacks you encounter, the more energy you can transform. Remember, in the world of innovation, failure isn't your enemy, it's your energy source. Learn to transform it. Learn to convert it. Learn to use it as fuel. That's how you become unstoppable. That's how you achieve breakthrough. That's how you change the world.